My mother and sister thought bringing my sister's new rich boyfriend to dinner was the perfect chance to humiliate me again. But when he bragged about his job, he didn't realize the failure, sitting across from him, was actually the executive investigating him for massive fraud. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The exhaustion sat in my bones like wet sand, heavy and abrasive. I sat in my car, the engine idling, staring at the front door of my mother's house. My hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the sheer, crushing weight of the last 72 hours. I hadn't slept. I had barely eaten. My eyes felt dry and gritty, and every blink was a conscious effort. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles, pale skin, hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun that I hadn't touched since leaving the office at 4:00 a.m. that morning. I looked like a wreck. I looked like exactly what my family thought I was, a struggling, burnt-out failure who couldn't keep her life together. And tonight, I was walking into a firing squad. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from Alexa. "Don't be late, and please, for the love of God, try to look presentable. Chad is important. Do not embarrass me." I let out a bitter, hollow laugh that scraped against my dry throat. Chad is important. If only she knew just how important Chad had become to me over the last 3 days. But not in the way she thought. To Alexa, Chad was the golden ticket, the man who was going to elevate her social status and finally prove that she was the superior sister in every conceivable way. To me, Chad was Subject 409, the central figure in a sprawling, multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme that I had been meticulously unraveling file by encrypted file. I worked in data entry. That's what I told them. That's what I had told them for 5 years. It was easier that way. If Patricia, my mother, knew that I was actually the director of internal compliance and ethics for the very multinational conglomerate Chad worked for, if she knew I made 3 times what Chad likely made, she would have drained me dry. She would have demanded cars, vacations, loans that were never repaid. So I let them believe the lie. I let them believe I was Aubrey, the disappointment. Aubrey, who lived in a small apartment, my second home, a decoy, and drove a beat-up sedan, my weekend car. But tonight, the masquerade felt different. The stakes weren't just about family dynamics anymore. They were legal. They were federal. I turned off the ignition, the silence of the suburbs rushing in to fill the cabin. I grabbed my purse, a scuffed, generic tote bag I used specifically for these visits, leaving my Italian leather briefcase hidden in the trunk. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. The nausea was rising again, a mix of sleep deprivation and the dread of what was about to happen. I wasn't just walking into a dinner. I was walking into a crime scene where the criminals didn't even know they'd been caught yet. And the worst part? The person I was about to destroy wasn't just a faceless executive anymore. He was sitting at my mother's dining table, holding my sister's hand. The betrayal I felt wasn't from Chad. He was just a greedy suit. The betrayal was from them, my own blood. They had invited me here tonight specifically to witness their triumph and my failure. They wanted an audience for their happiness, and they wanted a punching bag to make themselves feel taller. I opened the car door and stepped out into the cool evening air. As I walked up the driveway, I could see them through the bay window. Patricia was laughing, pouring wine. Alexa was beaming, leaning into a man in a sharp gray suit. They looked like a picture-perfect family. I stopped at the door, my hand hovering over the bell. A wave of dizziness hit me, and I had to grab the doorframe to steady myself. "You have no idea," I whispered to the wood, the secret burning on my tongue like acid. "You have absolutely no idea what you've done." The moment I stepped through the door, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The warmth and laughter I had witnessed from the driveway evaporated instantly, replaced by a stiff, performative silence. Patricia was the first to spot me. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She simply scanned me from head to toe, her eyes narrowing as they landed on my wrinkled blouse and the scuffed toes of my flats. Her lip curled, just slightly, a micro-expression of disgust I had spent 29 years memorizing. "You're here," she said, her voice flat. It wasn't a greeting, it was an accusation. "And look at you, did you even try, Aubrey? I told you this was a special occasion." I closed the door behind me, leaning back against it for a split second of support. "Hello to you too, Mom. I came straight from work. It's been a long week." "Work," Alexa scoffed from the living room. She was perched on the edge of the white sofa, her posture rigid and regal. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my decoy car, a shimmering, silk thing that screamed new money. If you can call typing numbers into a spreadsheet for minimum wage work. "Honestly, Aubrey, you look like you've been sleeping in your car." "I haven't been sleeping much at all, actually," I said, walking further into the room. My voice was raspy, lacking the energy to fight back. "Deadlines." "Deadlines for data entry?" Patricia laughed, a sharp, barking sound that grated on my nerves. She turned her back on me, gesturing toward the living room. "Well, don't just stand there hovering like a ghost. Come and meet someone who actually understands the meaning of a career." I moved into the living room. The man in the gray suit stood up. "Chad." Seeing him in person was jarring. I had spent the last 72 hours looking at his face on monitors, in security footage, and on ID badges. I knew his social security number. I knew his bank account balance in the Caymans. I knew he had a nut allergy and that he preferred terrified assistants over competent ones. But seeing him here, standing on my mother's Persian rug, smiling that practiced, predatory smile, made my stomach turn. He was handsome in a generic, corporate way. Perfectly styled hair, a suit that fit too well, a watch that cost $40,000, bought, I knew for a fact, with funds diverted from the vendor procurement account last month. "You must be Aubrey," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, too firm, a dominance play disguised as a greeting. "Alexa has told me so much about you." The pause was deliberate. He looked at me with eyes that were cold and assessing. He saw the tired woman in the cheap clothes, and he immediately categorized me: prey, unimportant, beneath notice. "Nice to meet you, Chad," I said, taking his hand. My skin crawled at the contact. "I've heard a lot about you, too." "Oh, I'm sure," Alexa chimed in, slipping her arm through his and squeezing his bicep. "I've been gushing. Unlike some people, Chad is actually going places. He's an executive, Aubrey, a real one, at OmniCorp." The name of the company hung in the air like a weapon. "OmniCorp," I repeated, keeping my face perfectly neutral. "That's impressive." "It is," Patricia said, walking in with a tray of appetizers. She shoved the tray toward Chad, bypassing me completely. "He's in charge of, what was it again, Chad? Strategic accounts." "Global strategic accounts and logistics," Chad corrected, puffing his chest out slightly. "It's a high-pressure environment, very intense. We handle billions in flow. Only the sharks survive." He winked at Alexa. She giggled. I watched them, a strange sensation washing over me. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was a terrifying sense of calm. They were performing a play, reciting lines about power and success, completely unaware that the director of the show was standing right in front of them. "Billions," I murmured, almost to myself. "That's a lot of responsibility. You must have to be very careful with the details." Chad laughed, a dismissive sound. "Details are for the grunts, Aubrey. That's for the people in the basement to worry about. People like, well, you know, I deal with the big picture, the vision." "Right," I said, forcing a small, tight smile. "The vision." "Come on," Alexa said, pulling Chad toward the dining room. "Let's eat. I don't want the food to get cold while we explain corporate hierarchy to Aubrey. She'll never get it anyway." As I followed them into the dining room, watching my mother fawn over Chad as if he were royalty, a thought struck me. A clear, crystalline thought that cut through the fog of my exhaustion. They think I'm the loser here. They think I'm the charity case. I looked at Chad's back, the expensive suit, the confident stride. I thought about the file sitting on my encrypted drive, the one labeled Operation, Clean Sweep. I thought about the forensic accounting report that linked his signature to 4 shell companies. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I knew exactly who Chad was, even if he didn't know me. And by the time dessert was served, he was going to wish he had never learned my name. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. The table was set with Patricia's best china, the stuff she usually saved for when the terrifying Homeowners Association president came to inspect the property. But tonight, it was all for Chad. I sat at the end of the table, the S. Pot usually reserved for children or unwanted guests. I picked at my roast chicken, the metal of the fork feeling heavy in my hand. I wasn't hungry. The knot of anxiety in my stomach had hardened into a cold, dense stone. For years, I had played this role, the scapegoat, the black sheep. It started when I was 22. Dad had left, leaving a mountain of debt that Patricia refused to acknowledge. Alexa was in college, the star student who needed tuition, sorority dues, and a spring break fund. I was the one who stayed behind. I was the one who worked 3 jobs to keep the house from being foreclosed on. I was the one who paid off the credit cards Patricia maxed out in grief. But I never told them. I paid the bills anonymously, sliding cash into accounts, intercepting foreclosure notices, and paying them off with money I made from my entry-level compliance job. I let them think the bank made a mistake. I let them think luck saved them. Why? Because I knew them. If they knew I had money, they would stop trying. They would become parasites. So I hid my promotions. I hid my bonuses. I hid the fact that I rose through the ranks of OmniCorp faster than anyone in the company's history. I became the struggling typist, so they would leave me alone. And in return for saving them, they despised me. They despised me because my struggle reminded them of what they feared most, poverty. So, Chad, Patricia said, her voice dripping with sugary sweetness as she poured him more wine. Alexa tells me you're looking at buying a property in the Heights. Chad leaned back, swirling his wine glass. He didn't even look at her when he answered. He was too busy admiring the way the light hit the crystal. We're thinking about it. The market is soft right now for buyers with liquid capital. I'm thinking something with a view. Maybe 6,000 square feet. Alexa needs a proper closet. Alexa beamed, resting her hand on his thigh. Chad says the master suite has to be bigger than my current apartment. Well, you deserve it, Patricia said, shooting a sharp glance at me. Unlike some people who are content renting a shoebox above a laundromat. I didn't live above a laundromat. I owned a penthouse downtown, but I didn't correct her. It sounds lovely, I said quietly. Chad turned his gaze to me. His eyes were glassy, perhaps from the wine, or perhaps just from the intoxication of his own ego. You know, Aubrey, Alexa tells me you're single, still. The way he said still made it sound like a terminal illness. I focus on my work, I said. Work, Chad chuckled. He set his glass down. Right, the typing. You know, we have temp agencies we use at OmniCorp for the lower level stuff. Filing, coffee runs, I could probably pull some strings, get you an interview. It pays better than whatever freelance gig you're doing, might help you get out of that. Shoebox. That is so generous of you, Chad, Patricia exclaimed, clapping her hands together. Did you hear that, Aubrey? Chad is offering to help you. You should be groveling. I'm happy where I am, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Chad's smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a sneer now. Don't be proud, Aubrey. Pride is for people who can afford it. Honestly, it's a little embarrassing for Alexa. She's moving up in the world. She's going to be the wife of a VP soon. She can't have a sister who looks like, well, like you. He gestured at me with his fork, a casual, dismissive wave that encompassed my lack of makeup, my plain clothes, my entire existence. It reflects poorly on the brand, Chad added, taking a bite of potato. And in my world, image is everything. You have to look the part to get the part. That's why I drive the car I drive. That's why I wear this watch. He tapped the face of his timepiece. Perception is reality. If you look like a loser, people treat you like one. I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. He was lecturing me on image. He was lecturing me, the woman who wrote the ethics code he was currently violating, on professional standards. Is that so? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. You think the watch makes the man Chad? I think the watch shows the world that I'm a winner, Chad said, leaning forward. And it shows that I'm smart enough to take what I'm worth. Take what you're worth, I repeated slowly. Exactly, he grinned at Alexa. It's all about leverage, knowing where the bodies are buried, right? He laughed at his own joke. Patricia laughed. Alexa laughed. I stared at him. He had no idea. He was sitting there, eating my mother's roast chicken, completely oblivious to the fact that I was the one holding the shovel. The transition from the main course to dessert felt like a military maneuver. Patricia cleared the plates with a frantic, nervous energy, her eyes darting between Chad and the kitchen as if checking for invisible snipers. She was desperate for this night. To be perfect, desperate to seal the deal on Alexa's ascension into the country club tax bracket. I watched her scrape the remnants of the roast chicken into the bin, her hands shaking slightly. It was pathetic, it was tragic, and it was about to get much, much worse. Cheesecake, Patricia announced, returning to the table with a flourish. She placed a massive, store-bought cake in the center of the table. Chad, I hope you saved room. Alexa tells me you have a sweet tooth. I always make room for the best, Chad said, loosening his tie. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of satisfied gluttony. He took a sip of his wine, his third glass, and his eyes, slightly glazed now, drifted back to me. He couldn't let it go. That was the thing about men like Chad. It wasn't enough for them to win, they needed someone else to lose. My silence, my lack of fawning, was irritating him. He needed me to acknowledge his superiority. He needed the loser sister to bow down. So, Aubrey, he started, his voice a little louder now, slurring just a fraction on the vowels. We never really got to the bottom of it. What exactly keeps you busy all day? Alexa says data entry, but that's vague. Is it insurance, medical billing, or are you one of those people who types in the captchas for websites? He laughed at his own joke. Alexa joined in, a high, tittering sound that made my teeth ache. I set my fork down. The metal clinked against the china, a sharp, deliberate sound that cut through their laughter. It's a bit more complex than that, I began, my voice calm, leveled. Oh, don't, Patricia snapped immediately. She was hovering with the cake knife, her face tight with warning. Don't bore him, Aubrey. Nobody wants to hear about your spreadsheets or your little struggles with the rent. Don't embarrass us. Yeah, Alexa added, leaning her head on Chad's shoulder, looking at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. Honestly, Aub, maybe lie this time, make something up. Tell him you're an astronaut or a brain surgeon, just, so you don't sound so pathetic for once. The room went silent. The insult hung in the air, gross and heavy. Alexa smirked, waiting for me to shrink, to look down at my lap, to apologize for my existence as I had done 1,000 times before. But I didn't look down. I looked up, and for the first time that night, I let the mask slip. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It wasn't the polite, submissive smile of Aubrey, the struggling typist. It was the smile I wore when I walked into a boardroom to fire a CEO. It was the smile of the Grim Reaper. Lie, I repeated softly, testing the word. You want me to lie, Alexa? The air in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a static charge building before a storm. Patricia froze with the knife halfway through the cheesecake. Alexa frowned, sensing a change in the frequency, but unable to identify it. I don't think I need to lie, I said, my eyes locking onto Chad's. Actually, Chad, my work is quite fascinating, especially lately. I've been working on a very specific project, a forensic audit. Chad blinked. The wine glass paused halfway to his mouth. Audit. Yes, I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the table. It involves a high-level executive at a major multinational. Omnicorp, actually. You know it well. Chad's smile faltered, just a fraction. Omnicorp has hundreds of auditors. We have a whole department for that. We do, I said, but this is internal, strictly confidential. It's regarding the vendor procurement strategy for the Southeast region. Specifically, a shell company called Apex Solutions LLC. The color drained from Chad's face so fast it was as if someone had pulled a plug in his heel. His skin went from a flushed, wine-soaked pink to a sickly, translucent gray. The glass in his hand trembled, the red liquid creating a tiny tidal wave against the crystal. Apex, he whispered. His voice was no longer booming. It was thin, brittle. Apex Solutions, I enunciated clearly. Registered in Nevis, bank accounts in the Caymans. They bill Omnicorp for consulting services that never happen. $40,000 a month. For the last 18 months. It's quite a lot of money for consulting. Patricia looked between us, confused. Aubrey, what are you babbling about? What is she talking about, Chad? Chad didn't answer. He couldn't. He was staring at me, his eyes wide, pupils dilated in pure, primal panic. He was processing the impossible geometry of the situation. The struggling sister, the audit, the specific name of his fake company. I think, I said, picking up my wine glass and taking a slow, deliberate sip, that Chad knows exactly what I'm talking about. Don't you, Chad? The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that screams. Chad stammered. He set his wine glass down, missing the coaster, the stem clicking loudly against the wood table. I have no idea what you're talking about. You're confused, you're a typist. You don't know anything about corporate structure. He was trying to rally. He was trying to find the arrogance that had served him so well for the last 2 hours, but it was slipping through his fingers like water. Do I asked, my voice dropping to that professional, terrifying pitch I used during interrogations. Let's test that theory. You authorized 3 payments to Apex last week. Tuesday, specifically, 10:42 a.m. Authorization code Zulu94. You bypassed the secondary approval protocol by flagging it as urgent logistics. Is that correct? Chad flinched as if I had slapped him. Stop it. Alexa slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. Aubrey, stop it right now. You're making things up. You're just jealous because Chad is successful and you're nobody. Why are you trying to ruin my night? I'm not ruining your night, Alexa, I said calmly, not breaking eye contact with Chad. I'm saving you from a felony accessory charge. Because when the feds come for him, and they will, they tend to look at the girlfriends too, especially the ones with the new jewelry. Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Felony? Aubrey, have you lost your mind? Apologize to Chad this instant. Chad, tell her she's crazy. She turned to Chad, expecting him to laugh, to dismiss me, to reinstate the reality where he was the prince and I was the pauper. But Chad wasn't laughing. He was sweating. Beads of perspiration were forming on his upper lip, glistening under the chandelier light. He loosened his tie further, his breathing shallow. Who told you that? Chad hissed, his voice low and dangerous. Who have you been talking to? Did you hack my email? That's illegal, you know. I could have you arrested. I didn't hack anything, I said. I have access, full access, level 5 clearance. You're a temp, he shouted, his composure finally snapping. You're a nobody, you enter data, you don't have level 5 clearance. Only the directors have that. Exactly, I said. I reached into my cheap tote bag. The sound of the zipper opening was the only sound in the room. I pulled out a sleek black folder. It wasn't cardboard. It was leather-bound, stamped with the gold Omnicorp emblem. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and came to a stop right in front of his plate. Open it, I commanded. Chad stared at the folder like it was a bomb. I said, "Open it." His hand shook violently as he reached out. He flipped the cover open. The first page was a personnel file. His personnel file. Stamped across the top in bold, red ink was the word, terminated. Underneath that was a photo. A surveillance photo of him withdrawing cash from an ATM in the Cayman Islands. "My name," I said, watching him read, "is Aubrey Vance. You might not know my face, Chad, because I usually work out of the Chicago office. But you know my title. You've sent emails to my department." He looked up, his eyes reading the name on the bottom of the document. Aubrey Vance, Director of Internal Compliance and Ethics. "You," he choked out, "you're the Reaper." "That's the nickname, yes," I said pleasantly. "I prefer Director, but I answer to both." Patricia let out a confused whimper. "Director, Aubrey, but you said you were a typist. You said you barely made rent." "I lied, Mom," I said, finally looking at her. "I lied because every time I have money, you try to take it. I lied because I wanted to know if you loved me or just what I could buy for you. I think we got our answer tonight." "This is fake," Chad said, pushing the folder away, though his voice lacked any conviction. "You printed this at Kinko's. It's a joke. A sick joke." "Is it?" I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Because I have the chief legal officer on speed dial. He's waiting for my call to authorize the freezing of your assets. The car, the one parked in the driveway, the repo team is already en route. The watch, you might want to take it off now. It's evidence." Chad stood up so fast his chair toppled over backward with a deafening crash. "You can't do this," he snarled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Do you know who I am? I bring in millions for that company." "You steal millions from that company," I corrected. "And as of 9:00 a.m. this morning, when I filed the final report, you are no longer an employee. You are a liability." The crash of the chair seemed to snap Alexa out of her trance. She stood up, her face flushed with a mix of humiliation and rage. But true to form, her rage wasn't directed at the criminal who had lied to her. It was directed at the sister who had exposed him. "You are such a jealous, bitter witch," Alexa screamed, grabbing Chad's arm as if to physically anchor him to the room. "Look what you're doing. You're making up these insane lies just to humiliate him. Mom, do something, kick her out." "Aubrey," Patricia said, her voice shaking, trying to regain control of her dinner party. "This has gone too far. I don't know what kind of game you're playing with these props, but you are ruining your sister's happiness. Chad is a good man. He treats her like a princess." "He's treating her like a shield, Mom," I said, gesturing to Chad, who was currently hiding behind Alexa, frantically typing on his phone. "Look at him. Is that the behavior of an innocent man? Or is that the behavior of a man trying to transfer funds before the accounts lock?" "I'm calling security," Chad yelled, holding his phone up. "I'm calling the police. You're harassing me." "Go ahead," I said, crossing my arms. "Call the police, please. It will save me the trouble. Because the FBI is already building the indictment. Do you really want to expedite the process?" Chad froze, the phone lowered slowly. "You're bluffing," he whispered. You wouldn't do that to your own family. Alexa, tell her." He turned to Alexa, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was desperate, too tight. "Baby, tell her to stop. Tell her she's crazy. I'm going to buy you that house, remember? The one with the closet? We're going to Paris next month. Don't let her ruin this." Alexa looked at him, her eyes wide and wet. She wanted to believe him. I could see the desperate struggle in her face. She wanted the house. She wanted the status. She wanted the fantasy so badly that she was willing to ignore the burning building around her. "Aubrey," Alexa pleaded, turning to me, just stop, please, even if he made a mistake. Can't you just fix it? You said you're a director. If you're really a director, you can fix it. Make it go away. For me." I stared at her, stunned. Even now, faced with the reality of his crimes, her first instinct was to ask me to cover it up. To ask me to commit a felony so she could keep her imaginary lifestyle. Fix it? I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Alexa, he stole $4 million. He embezzled from the pension fund. That's people's retirement money. You want me to fix that? He's my boyfriend, she wailed. Doesn't family mean anything to you? Does it mean anything to you? I shot back. You spent the last 2 hours mocking me, calling me a loser, telling me to lie because I was an embarrassment, and now you want a favor. I didn't mean it, Alexa sobbed. We were just joking, Mom, tell her. Patricia stepped forward, her face a mask of cold calculation. She had assessed the situation. She realized now that I wasn't bluffing. The folder, the details, the confidence, it was real. I was the one with the power. And instantly, her allegiance shifted, not to morality, but to self-preservation. Chad, Patricia said, her voice dropping the sweet veneer. Is it true? Chad looked at her wild-eyed. Patricia, listen, it's a misunderstanding. Corporate accounting is complicated. Is it true? Patricia barked, stepping closer. Did you steal the money? Are you fired? I'm not fired, Chad insisted, though his voice cracked. I'm on administrative leave, pending an investigation. It's standard. Aubrey is blowing this out of proportion. Administrative leave, I corrected, is for people who might be innocent. You were terminated for cause. Section 4, paragraph 2 of your contract. Gross misconduct and fiduciary breach. I pulled one last piece of paper from the folder. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a chat log. And Alexa, I said, softening my voice just a fraction. Before you defend him any further, you might want to see this. It's a transcript of his messages on the company server. Specifically, the ones to his other fiancé in Miami. The room went dead silent. Alexa froze. His what? Her name is Jessica, I said, sliding the paper across the table toward her. He bought her a condo last month, using the same shell company account. He told her he was coming down next week to finalize the wedding plans. Alexa looked at the paper. She looked at Chad. Chad's face was a mask of pure terror. The embezzlement was one thing, business. But this was the end of his shield. Baby, no, Chad pleaded, holding his hands up. That's a client. Jessica is a client. The messages say otherwise, I said. Quote, can't wait to leave this town and that clingy, desperate girl behind. Just need to secure the last transfer. End quote. Alexa read the words. Her hands started to shake. The tears stopped, replaced by a flushing, blotchy red rage that started at her neck and moved up to her cheeks. She looked up at Chad. The power couple fantasy dissolved in an instant, replaced by the raw, ugly truth. Clingy, she whispered, desperate. Alexa, wait, Chad started, reaching for her. She slapped him. It wasn't a movie slap. It was a messy, loud, open-handed crack that echoed through the dining room. Chad stumbled back, holding his C. Ehik. Get out, Alexa screamed, grabbing a handful of the cheesecake and hurling it at him. It hit his expensive suit with a wet splat. Get out of my house. You're crazy, Chad yelled, backing away. You're all crazy. I don't need this. I have millions. No, actually, I said, checking my phone. You don't. The asset freeze just went through. Your accounts are locked, Chad, including the offshore ones. You have exactly $0 access right now. Chad stopped at the door. He looked at his phone. He tapped the screen frantically. Then he looked at me. The hate in his eyes was absolute. You ruined everything, he spat. No, Chad, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I just balanced the books. The sound of the front door slamming shut behind Chad echoed through the house like a gunshot. For a moment, the three of us stood frozen in the dining room, Alexa with cheesecake on her hands, Patricia clutching a napkin to her chest, and me, standing by the table, the black folder still open. He's running, I said, my voice calm but sharp. He thinks he can make it to the airport before the flag hits the TSA database. The airport? Alexa whispered, her voice trembling. She looked at the door, then back at me, her eyes wide with a mix of horror and lingering confusion. Aubrey, is it really? Is it all true? The FBI, the other fiancé. It's all true, Alexa, I said, walking to the window and peering out through the blinds. Every word, but he's not going to make it to the airport. He's not even going to make it out of the cul-de-sac. Outside, the quiet suburban street was suddenly bathed in a kaleidoscope of red and blue light. No sirens, just the silent, overwhelming strobe of authority. 3 black SUVs had pulled up to the curb, blocking the driveway completely. "Oh my God," Patricia gasped, rushing to the window beside me. "The police? Here, in front of the neighbors. Aubrey, look at the Johnsons. They're on their porch. This is humiliating." "It's about to be a lot worse than humiliating for Chad," I said. "Come on." I walked to the front door and opened it. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the crackle of police radios. Chad was in the driveway, frantically trying to start his luxury sedan. The engine sputtered and died. The remote disable protocol I had authorized 10 minutes ago had kicked in perfectly. He was slamming his hands against the steering wheel, screaming mute curses behind the glass. 2 agents in windbreakers with FBI emblazoned on the back were walking up the driveway, hands on their holstered weapons. "Step out of the vehicle," one of them shouted, his voice cutting through the night. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Chad froze. He looked at the agents, then back at the house. He saw me standing on the porch, framed by the light of the entryway. For a split second, I saw the calculation in his eyes, the desperate, rat-like urge to run, to fight, to do anything but accept the reality crashing down on him. Slowly, painfully, he opened the car door and stepped out. The arrogance was gone. The swagger was gone. He looked small, deflated, a man whose entire identity had been stripped away along with his corporate access card. "This is a mistake," Chad yelled, his voice cracking as he raised his hands. "I'm a director at Omnicorp. You can't do this. That woman," he pointed a shaking finger at me, "she's crazy. She hacked my accounts." The lead agent didn't even look at him. He looked past Chad, directly at me. "Director Vance," the agent called out. "Agent Miller," I replied, stepping off the porch and walking down the driveway. I could feel the eyes of every neighbor on the street burning into us. The Johnsons were indeed watching. So were the Millers. Curtains were twitching all up and down the block. This was the public spectacle Chad had feared, but it wasn't his success on display. It was his ruin. I reached the bottom of the driveway, holding the black folder. "We secured the perimeter as requested," Agent Miller said, nodding respectfully. "The asset seizure warrant was signed 5 minutes ago. We have teams at his apartment and the storage unit in Miami." "Good," I said, handing him the folder. "Here is the hard copy of the internal audit, the chat logs regarding the flight risk, and the affidavit from his assistant confirming the document shredding. It's everything you need for the indictment." Chad stared at me, his mouth agape. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The agents weren't listening to him, they were reporting to me. "Aubrey," he whispered, you're actually." "I told you, Chad," I said, my voice cold and final. "I'm the one who handles the details, and you missed a lot of them." "Turn around," Agent Miller barked at Chad. The click of the handcuffs was loud in the silence of the street. It was a definitive, metallic sound, the period at the end of a very long, very fraudulent sentence. "Hey." Alexa had come out onto the porch. She stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering in the night air. She watched as the man she thought she was going to marry, the man she had belittled me for not being good enough for, was patted down and shoved unceremoniously into the back of a government SUV. As the agents closed the door, Chad pressed his face against the glass. He wasn't looking at Alexa. He wasn't looking at the house he had promised to buy. He was looking at me, and in that look there was no more mockery, no more disdain, just pure, unadulterated fear. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just watched. "Is it done?" Patricia asked, coming up behind me. Her voice was small, stripped of its usual imperious tone. She was looking at the neighbors, shrinking away from their gaze. "Is he gone?" "He's gone, Mom," I said, turning back to the house. For a very long time, 10 to 15 years, I'd imagine. Federal sentencing guidelines are pretty strict when it comes to pension fraud. I walked past her, back up the driveway toward my sister. Alexa hadn't moved. She was staring at the empty space where Chad's car had been. He called me clingy, she whispered, the words barely audible. He was laughing about me to her, to Jessica. He was using you, Alexa, I said gently. He needed a local address to register the shell company. He needed someone with a clean credit history to co-sign the lease on the warehouse. He was setting you up to take the fall if things went south. Alexa looked at me, her eyes filling with fresh tears. He was going to frame me. Why do you think he was so insistent on putting the utilities in your name? I asked. Why did he want you to sign those insurance documents last week? I intercepted them, by the way. They weren't insurance. They were incorporation papers listing you as the sole proprietor of Apex Solutions. Alexa's knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the concrete, holding her up. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing ugly, wrenching sobs of a woman whose world had just been shattered. I'm so stupid, she cried. I'm so stupid, Aubrey. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I held her there in the driveway, under the harsh glare of the porch light. The neighbors were still watching. The police lights were fading into the distance. But for the first time in years, I didn't care what anyone thought. I wasn't the struggling typist anymore. And my sister wasn't the golden child. We were just two sisters, standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. The house was painfully quiet after the police left. The adrenaline that had sustained us through the confrontation had drained away, leaving behind a heavy, exhausted silence. We sat in the living room, the same room where, hours earlier, Chad had bragged about his watch. Now, it felt like a different planet. Alexa was curled up on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow, her makeup streaked and ruined. Patricia was pacing by the fireplace, nervously rearranging knickknacks, unable to sit still. I sat in the armchair, sipping a glass of water. I had put the director mask away. The cold efficiency was gone, replaced by a deep, aching tiredness. So, Patricia said finally, stopping her pacing to look at me. Director of Internal Compliance. Yes, I said. And the money, she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. The salary, is it substantial? I sighed. I knew this was coming. It was always the first question. It is, I said. I make more in a month than I told you I made in a year. Patricia's eyes widened. And you hid it from your own mother, from your sister who was struggling with student loans. Aubrey, how could you be so selfish? We've been worried sick about you. We thought you were destitute. Did you? I asked, setting the glass down. Did you really worry, Mom? Or did you just use my failure to make yourselves feel better? Every time I came over, it was comments about my clothes, my car, my job. You didn't offer to help. You offered judgment. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She looked at Alexa, then back at me. The truth of it hung in the air. I hid it because I wanted a family, I said quietly. I didn't want to be an ATM. I didn't want to be the person you called only when you needed a check. I wanted to see if you could love me just for being Aubrey. Not success story Aubrey, just me. Alexa looked up from the pillow. Her eyes were red, swollen. And we failed, she whispered. Didn't we? You didn't make it easy, I admitted. Tonight was hard, Alexa. Hearing you tell me to lie, hearing you call me pathetic, that hurt more than anything Chad said. Alexa flinched. Fresh tears spilled over. I know, I got caught up in it. He made everything sound so perfect. I wanted it to be true so badly, and I took it out on you because looking at you made me feel guilty, like I was Lee. Leaving you behind. You weren't leaving me behind, I said. You were being dragged down by an anchor. I stood up and walked over to the sofa. I sat down next to her. She stiffened for a moment, then leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. It was a gesture we hadn't shared since we were teenagers. I stopped the transfer, I said softly. The insurance papers you signed, I never filed them. You're clear, Alexa. You're not liable for any of his debt or his crimes. The FBI knows you were a victim, not an accomplice. I made sure of that in my report. Alexa let out a long, shuddering breath. You saved me. After everything I said, you saved me. That's what big sisters do, I said, smoothing her hair, even when little sisters are being bratty. She let out a weak, watery laugh. I was more than bratty. I was a monster. We can work on that, I said. But for now, you're safe. That's what matters. 6 months later. The courtroom was sterile and cold, smelling of floor wax and old paper. I sat in the back row, not the front. I didn't need to be in the front to see justice done. Chad stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. The expensive gray suit was long gone, seized as evidence along with the watch and the car. He looked older. His hair was thinning, his posture slumped. When the judge read the sentence, 12 years in federal prison, restitution of $4 million, he didn't even flinch. He just looked tired. He turned as the bailiff led him away. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto mine. There was no anger left, just resignation. He nodded once, a small, barely perceptible movement. I didn't nod back. I just watched him disappear through the side door. It's over, Alexa whispered beside me. She looked different. Her hair was cut shorter, a professional bob. She was wearing a simple blazer and slacks. No more flashy jewelry, no more desperate need to impress. It's over, I agreed. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Patricia was waiting for us by the car. She was quieter these days. The dynamic had shifted. She still made comments, old habits die hard, but the venom was gone. She knew now that I wasn't someone to be trifled with. She respected me, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of awe, but the constant belittling had stopped. Did he cry? Patricia asked as we approached. No, Alexa said. He just took it. Good, Patricia said firmly. He deserves every day of it. She looked at me. Are you heading back to the city? Yeah, I said. I have a meeting with the board of directors tomorrow. We're restructuring the compliance division. The board, Patricia repeated, tasting the words. She smiled, a genuine, if slightly wistful smile. You know, I told the Bridge Club yesterday that my daughter is a director. They were very impressed. Thanks, Mom, I said. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a total personality transplant, but it was a start. I'm coming with you, Alexa said, linking her arm through mine. You promised to help me with my resume. Real work this time. No more consulting for boyfriends. Real work, I promised. I think there's an opening in logistics. Entry level, you'll have to start at the bottom. Alexa laughed. It was a clear, happy sound, free of the pretension that had choked her for so long. I think the bottom sounds just fine. Nowhere to go but up, right? Exactly, I said, unlocking my car, my real car, a sleek, black luxury sedan I had finally decided to stop hiding. Nowhere to go but up. We got in, the three of us. The family was still imperfect. There were still scars. But as I drove away from the courthouse, leaving the shadow of Chad and his lies behind us, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't need to hide anymore. I was Aubrey Vance. I was the director. And finally, I was just a sister again.